Benji kind of helped spark this investigation. Can you tell me about that?
That resolution filed in King County Superior Court requires the company to pay the state $3.75 million with interest.
Bailing out Benji regularly looks through these records of dogs' movement from state to state.
Bailing out Benji
played a key part in unraveling a nationwide puppy scheme.
Bailing out Benji,
an organization that's been working across the country to stop the pipeline of puppy mill breeders.
Bailing out Benji.
I will use my voice because it will come out, and I will keep doing it until there are no more puppy mill dogs. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 4, I think, of Bailing Out Benji's Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills. I say I think because Kristen and I have joked this is like our doomed episode. We have recorded it. This is third time's the charm. Third time's the charm for this subject. We joke all the time about not being good at technology stuff. We really are behind the scenes, but we all know how tech fails everyone. So, anywho, we are very excited to bring you the conversation surrounding working upstream.
I have followed Bailing Out Benji for quite a while as a supporter, as a volunteer. So I've always had kind of that high level knowledge of what it is that we do. I was more familiar with things like the shelters and rescues, things like that. I think as most, I'm not going to say normal people, as most people who are outside of the animal welfare world, the puppy mill world, just your average person on the street, I think we're all pretty familiar with things like shelters and rescues and what they do and the services they provide to the community. It's that upstream type organizations that I haven't had as much exposure to outside of just volunteering for Bailing Out Benji. So as I have been more involved in the organization, I'm learning that kind of stuff and really understanding or trying to understand that continuum of organizations that provide services in the animal welfare world or dog world specifically. And as I have been learning, there's a quote from Desmond Tutu that has just been rattling around in my head ever since I really got started with Bailing Out Benji. And the quote says, "There's a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in." And I've always heard this quote. I come from a children's mental health background, so I'm well aware of, continuums of service and upstream providers and downstream providers and trying to be that preventative source as well. So I have that to kind of link the Bailing Out Benji work too. A lot of times I would find myself kind of lamenting the upstreamness of what we do because it's hard for us to get funding. A lot of grant funding is for rescues and shelters and groups that are hands-on with pets. Donations are super easy. No, that's not fair. Donations are easier to get when you can show the picture of the dog that you just rescued, or the dog that you're trying to help save or whatever. And also, because we are very behind the scenes in the work that we do with our research, it's easy for us to get overlooked in the process of consequences for a bad breeder, for a puppy mill. It's easy for our work to kind of get co-opted a little bit, taken advantage of. And so seeing all of this with fresh eyes, while this is old news to the rest of you, it's been kind of eye-opening to me, just to kind of learn the dynamics of the work that we're doing. So all that to say, I was on LinkedIn one day and I came across a post from a person named Harry Ekman. He is from the UK, works at International Cat Care. And Harry, I hope you're watching. Sorry, this episode's a little bit later than I told you it would be, but thank you for tuning in. Harry took that Desmond Tutu quote and he built this amazing story around it that's very specific to the work that we do. And I love a good analogy, so this really jumped out at me. And I immediately sent it to you and was like, "Hey, this is it. This is what I'm talking about." And you said we should do a podcast. So here we are. I'm going to read this. It's a little long, so hang with me. It's good. Trust me, it'll be worth it. Harry writes, "You're standing by a river when you hear yelping and splashing and see a dog floating downstream. You jump in, grab it, and bring it to safety. Just as you get back to the shore, you hear the sound of a cat struggling in the water. Again, you jump in the river and rescue it, but then another dog and another cat drift into view. More people arrive to help. Now you have all these rescued dogs and cats on the riverbank. Some people set up feeding points, others build a shelter so they can be put somewhere safe. Veterinarians arrive to tend to sick and injured ones, and while all this happens, more dogs and cats continue to float downstream. Then one person stops and heads upriver. Someone yells, 'Where are you going?' They shout back, 'I'm going upstream to see who keeps throwing all these dogs and cats into the river.' Think about the work you do. How much of it is reactive? Responding to crises, solving problem after problem, day after day, jumping in the river to save a dog or a cat. Now imagine all the different branches and tributaries connected and flowing to and from that river. Imagine how many dogs and cats are flowing down those other routes and how many other people are doing the same as you, pulling dogs and cats out of their part of the river every day. Historically, the animal welfare sector has been much more about reacting and responding to problems than preventing them, working downstream far more than upstream. It's easy to understand why. It's more tangible. When there's a dog or a cat in front of you, you're going to help it. We're accustomed to dealing with emergencies, bandaging wounds after we've been injured, doing something that has a result right now, as opposed to doing something that might have an impact sometime in the future. But the thing about working reactively is that unless we push upstream, unless we break the cycle and change the system, we'll forever be pulling dogs and cats out of the river. Upstream, we see where the dogs and cats are coming from. Some are abandoned and left by the river. Maybe some are intentionally thrown in. Others just end up living and breeding on the riverbank until eventually there are too many and some simply fall in. Upstream is the bigger picture, the root cause. It's where we prevent problems from happening. We can't all be working upstream. While some are preventing problems, there still needs to be people reacting and responding to them when they inevitably still do. But upstream and downstream aren't separate destinations. They're a continuum, and there are countless points along the river between the two. And the work we do can be at any point. We just have to be honest about what we're doing and the impact we have. Dogs and cats will always need saving from rivers. Upstream is where we stop fighting an endless tide and where we can start making real, lasting change. So that's the post I saw that really resonated. And I know, like, as I tell people I'm working at Bailing Out Benji and what we do, I will get questions like, so what do you do with the animals after you rescue them? And then I have to try to explain to people, like, no, that's not really what we do. So, in an effort to let you get some words in on this episode, I would love to talk about kind of that continuum, who the different players are along the river, how they interact, the functions, that kind of stuff, just to clarify what Bailing Out Benji does in all of the process.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that there's a lot of misconceptions anyway about animal welfare. The more people I talk to outside of our circle, outside of our echo chamber, the more a lot of people think that if you're working with an animal rescue, quote unquote, we all do the same thing, we all think the same thing, we all behave the same way. And that's much like anything else. No two organizations are the same, no two people are the same. So it has been a kind of a big educational tool anyway, the last year, I would say. But that being said, I would probably start by explaining this with what people are most familiar with, and that would be like foster-based rescues. I think everyone listening has probably fostered a dog or knows someone who's fostered a dog or helps with rescue. And I would say those organizations are closest to the public in a sense. They're the ones who they don't have a facility. They get animals it's not open intake like shelters. They get to decide which animals they take for the most part, but they're kind of tasked with making sure the animal is safe and healthy before it gets into the foster home. making sure it's comfortable in the foster home, and then, of course, vetting it, training the dog, and then finding the dog the forever home. So, fosters are a lot closer to the public in the sense that they have a lot of communications with them. They have a lot of, like, their applications are typically a little longer than a shelter would be. Their requirements for adoption are typically a little harder to adopt from, not always, than like just your general shelter. But really, those are the boots on the ground people. And I would almost argue that those people are typically really burnt out because of the constant influx of animals coming and just knowing that no matter what you do, that dog you get adopted out, there's going to be another one tomorrow. And I think that you've got some experience with rescues.
Yeah, where do the dogs from the rescues typically come from?
Everywhere. So rescues, really, I think rescues kind of started to help when shelters were overburdened. They were kind of that like supportive organization in the community to make sure that animals weren't being euthanized in their community. And now it really kind of just depends on your location. So, like shelters in Iowa, for example, and Nebraska, a lot of our animals, not all, but a lot of our animals end up coming from kill shelters in states like Oklahoma and Kansas and Texas. And I really hate the term kill shelter. I'll talk about that in a second. But these are the shelters that are typically high euthanasia. And so we've got rescues that are pulling from them. There are rescues that get breeder surrenders, whether those are reputable breeders or if they're puppy mills. But these rescues will often just take straight from breeders, or some of them go to dog auctions and buy dogs, which is a hot topic issue in our world anyway. And so really they come from anywhere. They're not open intake, so they can tell owner surrenders no, but many rescues work hard to help owners either find ways to keep their dogs or get them into their program to find forever homes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then the next level would be those shelters. And those are typically open intake, not always. Again, not all, not always. When we talk, it's always going to be the gambit, the spectrum of what we're looking at. But a lot of shelters are in communities that are, they've been in communities for a while. Some of these have evolved from like the pounds from like the 70s and the 80s, and they've evolved into shelters in their community. When it comes to that open intake process, unfortunately, that's what kind of leads into the discussion of kill or no kill. It's become a huge talking point in the last 10 years, I would say. I'd have to look at the specific number. But it's become a really big talking point of getting shelters to become no kill. And so there's been a lot of pressure into bringing euthanasia rates down, not euthanizing for space, only having health or behavior issues to euthanize as reasons to euthanize. And so shelters have been under a lot of pressure lately to really, really make sure that the animals in their care get adopted out as fast as possible. And they typically do have oh gosh, I'm trying not to make this sound so negative because it's really not. But they do typically have easier processes to adopt from. And I would just note that no one gets into this world to kill animals. And so earlier when I said like I dislike the phrase no kill, I think that's because we're immediately making that shelter the bad guy. A lot of these kill shelters are in very low income communities. And pet overpopulation is a direct reflection of the community. So if your community is hurting and you don't have spay neuter programs and vaccine programs and pet food pantries, the shelter might suffer a little more and have more of an intake. So I just want people listening to understand that kill shelters aren't necessarily our enemy. They're the ones doing the hardest work in the lowest income communities, and they need our support too. So just kind of wanted to mention that because it's a misconception.
Yeah, and it's easy to say, like, we don't want little shelters. We don't want euthanasia for space. That makes perfect sense. No one wants that. Okay, but what's the solution? You know, if you are that shelter and you have no space and you have dogs on the doorstep, what is the answer? And that's not for us to decide, but definitely just something to hold in our minds as we are speaking out against these shelters that It's not the shelter that's the problem. It's the system in which the shelter is working. And just to kind of hold some grace for that, it's a broken system.
Right. And that's kind of part of the upstream work, right? So if you're a northern shelter or rescue that's pulling dogs from the south and pulling from these quote unquote kill shelters, leave resources behind, right? You should be helping that shelter with heartworm medication so they don't have dogs coming up to Iowa with heartworm. You should be trying to do free spay neuter programs so you're not constantly having to bring mama dogs up that are going to be euthanized in the shelter just because they're pregnant, right? So it's like, what resources can we leave behind to help with that upstream work so we are no longer constantly in crisis mode? Because right now, the animal sheltering world and the animal welfare world feels like it's always in crisis mode.
For sure. And when you're in that mode, it's harder to step outside and kind of think outside the box for some of these solutions to the problems, because you are just constantly being reactive. And I know too, when we talk about funding problems being upstream, is it's hard to get people excited to give money when you can't really show that tangible result. Like when we're preventing things from happening, we can't say we saved this many dogs. Like it's not something you can quantify. So when you talk about like rescue here that's pulling dogs from another shelter and to help that shelter, I can see rescue saying, with what money? Like, how are we supposed to tell our supporters in Iowa, we want you to give us money to help a shelter in Louisiana or whatever state they're coming from? Like, it's just, it's an uphill battle, and I can see that. So we push further upstream, right? So who else do we have on the river?
Yeah, so then you have like I would say like we'll start with the national organizations just because they often get confused as shelters and rescues because they're so loud and they're so everywhere with their messaging, whether it's anti-puppy mill or pro shelter. It's really hard when you're looking at on the ground. I know that I've heard for years that shelters are frustrated sometimes by getting confused with those national groups, but the national groups serve their own purpose. They have a lot of funding for lobbying. They have a lot of funding for like education. So they're able to really get messages out on the macro. And I think that like as I get into what we do, we kind of focus on the micro. We are very, very, very intense with our research and with everything we do. But it's kind of a little difference of a focus, right? It's like the small groups versus the large. The large groups are wonderful when it comes to, they do offer grants for shelters and rescues. They help shelters and rescues figure out animal movement. If there's a time of crisis, you'll often see, whether it's the ASPCA, the HSUS, whoever, you often see them rushing to the scene of the hurricane or the scene of the tornado, and they're helping to get animals out. So they're phenomenal at being that crisis care as well. And then you kind of have groups like ours that we're really just the research and the data because we want to figure out how bad the problem is. Right now, we are really seeing that no one quite knows how many dog breeders are out there, right? No one knows how many puppy mills are out there. Nobody knows if tomorrow, if we ban puppy mills, how many dogs need to find rescue or shelter, right? So we're trying really hard to get to the root of that because our work has been able to be the background noise, the background support of all these ordinances or state bills or cases where puppy mills get busted and dogs are saved. So there's all of these different layers of the different organizations, but I think we need to kind of show each other grace because everyone has their own agenda, everyone has their own way of doing things, their own reason for doing things. And so it doesn't mean anyone is wrong in this sense, right? We're all just kind of on the same path at different parts of the journey.
And talk about, the average Joe on the street getting things confused. I think probably until I started working for Bailing Out Benji, I thought our uh, big animal shelter in Des Moines, Animal Rescue League of Iowa, I thought was part of the Humane Society. I would, years ago, that was interchangeable. We would say, oh, I got this dog at the Humane Society. So in my brain, all these shelters are just like little offshoots from the Humane Society. I'm like, they're not even connected. Even the same thing. So yeah, it's I think part of the fun thing about being new at bailing out Benji is coming in with the uneducated eyes, because you all have been in this for so long that there's things that you just know, and I'm like still lost. So, but I love learning this kind of stuff, and I love having these kinds of conversations. And I think one of the benefits of being upstream is that we're not in that reactive place, right? And so we can be more agile. So when you talk about all these different organizations, we have kind of the same idea, the same goal, similar goals. Um, we just all might have different ways of getting there. And who's to say 10 years from now we look back, which one of us is going about it the right way, or if we're all combining together to go about it the right way. Um, but can you talk about some of the ways then that maybe over the years, um, our approach has shifted a little bit, or some things that we maybe have learned that we're kind of like looking at a little bit differently?
Yeah. So,
Without getting too far in the weeds, because we do need to have future podcast episodes. So save some of the good stuff.
yeah. And so, yeah, it's really hard because we are in a space where we shame and blame a lot, whether it's people who can't keep their pets. We are burnt out and we're frustrated. So we are upset that they dumped their animal at the shelter or rescue when that's the point of the shelter and rescue, right? We're the safe haven for the animals. But we often kind of get lost in that shame and blame. But for organizations like Bailing Out Benji or just rescue groups in general, we also shame and blame the public. So they're the ones who are supposed to be either adopting or buying. And we want them to be buying ethically. We want them to be buying humane. What I've learned the most over the past few years is that everyone has a different perception of humane. Everyone has a different perception of ethical. And so as we're talking to the public, and I mentioned it on last episode, when I say picture a puppy mill, people have a very specific thought of what a puppy mill is. And so if we haven't educated anyone about how to safely buy, instead of just, saying adopt, I wish everyone would, but there are families out there that just will never adopt dogs. And so I think even though we've always said research before you buy, that's been a really big talking point for bailing out Benji. I think that at the root of it, we're a part of the shaming and blaming, just because we want animals not to be in shelters or rescues. So I think that's kind of one of the biggest changes is we're trying to figure out how to educate the puppy buying public as well as continue making this a world for rescues and shelters to have access to the information we know. So those rescues and shelters still can still be advocates, they can still educate about puppy mills, but we want to try and reach the public as well because they're the ones financially supporting puppy mills.
Yeah, and we talk about being a safe space for those conversations. So if someone knows bailing out Benji as staunch adopt, don't shop advocates, and we're shaming people for not being able to take care of their pets and leaving them at shelters, and we're shaming people for going to breeders and buying a dog, no one is going to come to us and have those conversations. So we've talked a lot about how do we open the door for those conversations with families before they get their next pet. So if they are just set on buying from a breeder, let's help them know the red flags of what to look for, and help them figure out how to research the violations or the licensing of the breeder. Just acknowledging that as much as we want people to adopt, the reality is that, like you said, some families never will. Some people will only go to a breeder, and that's their prerogative to do so. So how do we keep that door open so that those people will come to us for the conversation before? We hear so many stories of people after they have gone to a bad breeder and the fallout from that.
Right. And it's not so much like just us, right? It's every single person listening has to become that safe haven for their friends and their family to go to ask. Because just like I was screaming for 14 years about puppy mills, right? And don't shop here, don't go here. Like I was that person. But Kristen, if you didn't know me, you wouldn't know to ask me and you wouldn't know to trust me. I am just a kid on the sidewalk with a protest sign, right? But my friends know to ask me. So when their friends ask them, my friends are like, "Oh, Mindy knows. Let me reach out to Mindy." And so the easier we make this conversation to have with our friends and family, they're the ones who are going to be buying the dogs. So you have to be the safe person and then you can pass them on to us. But you have to kind of be that, the public has to be that middleman, right? No one just knows who Bailing Out Benji is or even knows how to research a dog breeder.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm always on Reddit. There's so many posts of people saying, "How do I find a good breeder? How do I find a good breeder?" Or, "I found this breeder. There's some red flags. How do I know?" And I am forever commenting, bailing out Benji, trying to get people to come our way. Even before working at Bailing Out Benji, I was referring people like send an email, they'll help you out. So yeah, just getting the word out, letting people know that there is that resource out there, and that it's okay, and that there is help out there. And it's a, for me personally, I will always start with, are you sure you want to buy from a breeder? There are breed specific rescues if that's something you want. I'm a big fan of a mutt, but but yeah, it's good to have that safe resource for folks as well.
That's so funny because I start on the opposite side where I'm like, oh my God, do you really want a puppy? Puppies are terrible. Puppies are so
Well,
hard to train.
yes.
So I always lead with, I'm sorry, I like senior dogs. I like older dogs. But
Yeah,
there are a
I
lot of
am I am
people.
team no puppy in my house. If you want a puppy in your house, you
Yes.
do you, but I am past that. No babies, no puppies in my house.
Right. And I think that's also a part of like the education. It's not just find a breeder. It's not find a rescue or shelter. Before all of those discussions start, it has to be, am I ready for this dog? Am I ready for this breed? Is my lifestyle ready for this? I don't want to say like that should be the checklist and the loopholes that people have to jump through to adopt or anything, but I do think conversations need to happen where we make sure that the family is even ready to have that breed. I bought a husky when I was a kid, right? I should not have had a husky. I shouldn't have bought a puppy mill puppy anyway. But I could have gotten a little like fluffy Maltese dog, right? A little something that would have been in my lifestyle way better. And that didn't happen. So we all kind of make rash decisions sometimes. And I think that that has to be a part of the conversation with people.
And I know we're not talking about stores today, but I feel like if you're researching your breeder, you're researching a breed, it slows the process down a little bit, because dogs are stinking cute. And once someone gets in that pet store and they see those little fluffs in the cages, it's a rapid slide
Right.
down to a puppy in your back seat on the way home from the store. So I feel like that, anything to kind of slow that process down a little bit, engage our brains over our hearts when we see these cute little puppies, is also a good strategy.
And for me, I think it goes back to being that safe place too. Because if I have any friends who are interested in looking for a dog, usually they reach out to me first. But even if I see them like sharing a specific breed, we just start having conversations, right? Because you have to be proactive. But I really do love when my friends get a new dog. Whether or not they bought it or adopted it has been hard for me. That's been a part of my evolution as a person. My husband and I would like walk our dogs down the street and see someone with a little like fluffy puppy, and we're like, oh, we know they bought that dog. And we put our own assumptions onto that person, right? We're like, well, that person must have bought it. That person probably got it from a puppy mill. I am making all of that up in my head, all of it. And at the end of the day, I just want to go pet that person's dog and love on that little puppy. But for years, and I'm not kidding, for years, I would stop myself from petting someone's puppy if I thought that they bought it because I didn't want to enable bad behavior in my head. And now I kind of realize like, well, that's elitist. Like I am making my own morality and ethical decisions and I'm pushing it onto a stranger and then assuming the worst about that person. It's not fair. So,
And I want to definitely, um, kind of just caveat everything with like, this is what's right for me.
yeah.
you do what's right for you. However, I would like to help you make the best choice, available to you. So that's for sure. I think a lot of the conversations we have, whether we're talking about the puppy buying public or whether we're talking about other organizations that do this work, I feel like our mantra is that of grace and understanding and holding space for everyone's differences and different approaches. And in the real world, we cannot force anyone to do anything. So we just have to do the best we can with what we know and just try to help people along the best we can without bullying or shaming or any of that kind of stuff.
And something we've been getting into in the past few months, and we're going to do a whole deep dive into this, is our field research. And that's kind of caused some stir, some discussion because people are shocked about what we're doing. And for those who are unaware, the last like 10 months, Bailing Out Benji has been given access inside of USDA kennels for the first time. So Alexis and I are so used to going through inspection records, seeing the worst of the worst. Kristen, like I'm crying at my desk looking at photos and videos of horrific violations. Like things like that is what we're trying to shut down and we're trying to stop. But in the last 10 months of my life, I've been meeting people who I never thought I would meet. I've been having discussions I never thought I would have. And it's all a part of the big picture working upstream because I realized, much like we are not educating the puppy buyers, we are not educating breeders either. We're shaming, we're blaming, and some of it rightly so. Some places need shut down and should not come near an animal ever again, in my opinion. But there are people who have heard concerns, they've felt the pressure, now they're trying to do better. And we might not agree with everything they're doing, but it's just been a really interesting thing that Alexis and I have had access to because we go in and we talk to them and we see something and we're like, well, why do you do it that way? This is how the public perceives it when we see that. What is this? Then I get asked questions. What does this inspection violation mean? If your facility got a violation or someone what happened to lead to that? So as much as we're teaching them about animal rescue, rehoming after the fact, or just like what the public would like to see inside of kennels, we're learning just as much context because now the reports we see and the photos we see are that much worse. We understand what we're up against because we know that not everyone has to operate that way. They choose to operate that way.
I mean, as someone who sits across the room from you, um, this has not been an easy leap for you. I know you have made the comment like, a year ago, if you had told me I would be going to these places, I would have told you you were out of your mind. Um, but in the work we do, our mission is to end puppy mills. And we're defining that as inhumane breeding conditions, inhumane treatment of dogs. And we are invited to come on site to some facilities. Why would we say no to that? Why would we pass that up? Like you said, some we know are absolutely atrocious. We're not getting involved there.
We don't get invited to those places, right?
Don't get invited to those places. Not by the breeders anyway, maybe by other officials who are going to shut them down. But some of these, if we have a breeder who is saying, hey, listen, I want to be on your target of puppy mills, come see what I'm doing. We're not going there to give them a gold star. We're not going there to add them to a list of recommended breeders. It's just not what we do. But if they're saying we want to be better, we want you to come here and say, okay, this doesn't feel like a puppy mill. Why would we pass up that opportunity to go? And then when we do go, like you said, if there are things that are concerning, you have the space to say, hey, this is concerning. This does not look good to me as someone in this industry. If you go and you see things that are encouraging and that look really good, like, hey, this is okay. This is okay treatment of animals. Why would you not then acknowledge that also, right? So to be invited into these spaces and then to turn around and villainify them undeservedly would not be fair for us to do. To praise them like they're the best thing, that's not fair either. But it's field research. It's getting out and seeing some of the facilities that we've been talking about for years and years. It's trusting people that if they say they want to be better, um, let's give them a chance. Let's keep that door open and not shut that down completely.
And we used the phrase harm reduction the last time we had this discussion, because that's kind of when we want people to like, if they're going to buy a dog and we want them to do their research, right? It's just making sure we're eliminating the bad as much as we can. And I feel like a lot of the conversations we've had with people in the breeding space have been kind of along those lines. It's right now animals are suffering. And if I pass a law today, maybe those animals won't suffer, but also laws take time. Laws are full of loopholes sometimes. Laws can not work the way we intended them to. And so it's like, how can we, at the same time, while we're advocating for change, while we're educating the public, how can we encourage breeders to no longer do harm? But with that, it's a mindset change. We can't yell at them. We can't shame them. We have for years, and I think that helped with this conversation. But I think we're to a point where it's like, what does the future look like? And how do we get these worst puppy mills out of here? One of the biggest things I've noticed, and I've said it multiple times, we're the ones doing this research, right? And a lot of people think we're just talking about like in our space when we say we have the world's largest database of dog breeders and puppy mills and brokers and pet stores. Like we do, but it's not just, I should say, it's not just in our space that we're the largest, it's all over. As I'm talking to people on the other side of this issue, I'm realizing they don't know simple things like how many pet stores are selling puppies in each state. So while on the opposite side, they're fighting, say, to kill a preempt or to pass a preemption bill or to kill a pet store bill or whatever their agenda is, they're also working with a half a deck of cards. So we have all of these people working on policy and no one knows why. No one knows. Everyone's hyper focused on just USDA breeders and hyper focused on pet stores for the most part. No one knows how many state breeders are across the country except for us, right? No one knows how many puppy selling stores are across the country except for us and a few other organizations that are trying to stay on top of that number too. But it's just like, if we talked, if we shared what we know, maybe we could get a better grasp of how big this animal overpopulation crisis is. Because right now we don't really know how big it is. Everyone is using broken data from their side. And we said it last time, data doesn't have an agenda until we use it for an agenda. So it's really easy for both sides to scream at each other. And then you have us in the middle saying, well, you're both wrong. Have fun with that, right?
And that's there's so many amazing things that we can talk about on episodes going forward. It's conversations like this that get me really excited because this is the day-to-day work that we're doing. It's evolving, it's changing, it's growing, and I enjoy learning more about it, and I enjoy envisioning where it's going to take us in the future. Um, if we can, I want to circle back to our uh, upstream, like that continuum issue again, because I meant to ask earlier and I forgot, so I'm going to ask now. Um, when we see on the news a puppy mill got busted and they're pulling these dogs out of this puppy mill, um, the local authorities are there, the local shelters are there, getting these dogs out. Where do we fall in the story of that puppy mill um, being shut down?
Yes, I love that question because we get it all the time. People don't understand how any of that works. When I use the phrase like we work with so and so, I say that so generally. So when I say we work with the USDA, I just mean I file complaints and then they ask me if I have evidence that I can share with them, right? So I'm not working with them. I can't call them and ask them to kick down the door at a puppy mill and save the dogs. There is not a single person on this planet that I can call, and I mean anyone can call to just go kick down the door and save dogs that are someone else's property. So it takes so much behind the scenes work. I'll use the Daniel Gingrich case as an example because most people know what I'm talking about when I'm referring to that. But for those who don't know, he was a USDA dog breeder here in Iowa who had 220 violations in a 10-month period. Bailing Out Benji had been screaming about this case from the rooftops for months. We had been filing complaints with the sheriff, trying to get the USDA more involved, trying to get the state more involved. We were doing all of this background work, collecting evidence, really trying to get the dogs out, and no one was listening. We just kept seeing inspection records of the USDA going and truly walking by a dog. Her name was Goldie. They just kept walking by her as she got more skinny and more skinny and more skinny every single month. Later, we were able to get a USDA video from an inspector, and he was like chuckling and he said to the breeder, "You're lucky the ARL isn't with me here today." And that like horrified me, right? So I'm trying to work within this system, this very broken system. We're trying to get the sheriff to press charges. He's going into the media saying that I'm wrong. He's just, the breeder's just a kid. He made a mistake. He doesn't need to get in trouble. And I'm the bad guy. So we were doing all of this behind the scenes. And then finally, the Iowa Capitol Dispatch wrote an article about this case and using some of our quotes and some of our reports. And then it hit the news. And then there was pressure on the case and a spotlight on the case. The Department of Justice got involved. The Animal Rescue League of Iowa got involved. And after 10 months, unfortunately, way too many animals had to die. But the ARL was able to go in with their team. They also had other shelters helping, and I think it was the ASPCA. They all went in and they took every single animal off of his like 13 facilities. So he had 13 different locations. We weren't invited to that, and that's totally fine. We weren't in the news getting the credit for shutting this puppy mill down, and that's totally fine. But that kind of shows you like when there's a puppy mill bust and the ARL, who rightly so should be in the news, they took 514, the Animal Rescue League of Iowa. They took
For our out of Iowa listeners.
yes. But they took the 514 dogs off the property. They vetted them. They transferred them out to their rescue partners. So they fully deserve all the credit and the donations. But when you're talking about what led up to it, right? And that part of it, we all kind of leave each other out because in animal welfare, we see it as a zero-sum game sometimes. I would have loved to been in, my little ARL jacket or a Bailing Out Benji jacket, picking up the dogs, but that's not our role in this. I would love to kick down the door and save dogs. My role is to be the nerdy behind the scenes person, building the case, filing the complaints, and then literally being a tack dog behind the scenes, making sure these people who are in charge are doing their job for the animals.
In that case, it really was public pressure that made a difference. Do you think after the article was written and the public found out more about what was happening is what caused the other agencies to move?
I can't say that for sure, but I do believe on some level that really did help. Again, we were screaming. We were trying to get national groups to help talk about it. So it was once the media hit, because the Capitol Dispatch, once they write an article, it kind of goes everywhere in the state. Other locations pick it up. When that article hit, all of a sudden I had people from that community emailing us and saying, "Hey, I know where he's hiding dogs." So then we were able to contact the USDA and say, "Here are more locations we've heard about." I also learned after the fact that there's a dog broker down in that area who was trying his hardest to shut that place down and to get the dogs out as well. There's someone else that I actually called a sham rescue during that case she was there trying to get the dogs out too. And I want to do a whole episode on like what we've learned, what lessons we've learned. But for me, it's like, my God, if I had known those people and I could have just called them, or if we could have had some kind of open dialogue, maybe we could have saved the dogs faster. But unfortunately, it did take the whole 10 months. And I think at the height of it, he had around 1,000 adult dogs or 1,000 dogs on his property. But the day that the animals were saved, 514 came off, and then that's not including some that were taken off as an emergency before, and then he was allowed to auction his dogs off a few months prior.
Yeah, that's astounding. I know anytime I see in the news something in Iowa, I'm messaging you. Did we do this? Are we on a list? Is this one of ours? And I don't know. I'm not involved in the research side, and I haven't been around long enough to know. But even I, as an employee, don't know when we're behind the scenes on some of this stuff. So we definitely, release a monthly newsletter where we try to let people know here's what we're doing. Here are the things we've done. We have special projects going on, like we do right now, have our online research happening and try to educate people. But when it comes down to like, we're trying to get this particular puppy mill uh, held accountable, then that's a little bit harder to communicate. So appreciative of when media partners step in and can spread the word like that and draw some attention, because definitely when the public gets wind of it, they're not having it.
Right. And we have to use discernment too, a little bit. Like we can't be the boy who cried wolf. And I feel like that's kind of what happens in this space. I can't tell you how many times I see a post on Facebook and it's a shelter who took a bunch of dogs from an alleged puppy mill or whatever is going on in that scenario. I'll see someone share it and they're like, this is the mother of your pet store puppy. Or if you buy online, this is where your puppy came from. And that's like valid. Those are talking points, but there's no proof to back any of that up. I've seen so many puppy mill cases where we have no idea where that person was selling. There are other puppy mills that breed like just for research facilities and things like that. So not every dog bred in a facility is going to a store. And I think that's kind of one of those things we want to try to get people to understand too. There's so much nuance in this that when there's a puppy mill bust, you should be educating about it, but in a way that's factual and in a way that's helpful for people. Because the posts I see, it's all, well, this is the mother of your pet store puppy. How does that help someone know not to buy from a puppy mill? Like you have to give them things to look for and to ask, or else they're never going to know.
And moving past the slogans and the one line simple statements to help people to really think deeper about it. There's nothing simple about it. So let's leave that behind and let's move forward in a little more thoughtful manner and talking to people.
And our approach has worked. I think that we're up to 6. I'd have to double check that number. Maybe we'll talk about it with Alexis next week. But we've had like at least 6 facilities that, because of our complaints, dogs were rescued and charges were filed, and the breeder did get in trouble. When the USDA is failing or seeming fit to fail, when the standards aren't high enough, what Bailing Out Benji does is we take all of that evidence and then we try to make sure the breeder is meeting our state cruelty code. So typically, we're not even talking about breeding standards or breeding regulations. We are going through all of this evidence, and then we are looking at every state's specific cruelty code to see if the breeder violated that cruelty code. And that's how we've been successful getting the sheriff in and getting dogs taken out. But that was like 6 cases when there are hundreds of cases that we could weigh in on. Unfortunately, not every case is ever going to make it to court. Not every case warrants the dogs as much as we wish we could save them. Not every case is going to legally allow people to go in and take the animals. So, what upstream work, what preventative work can we do to make sure that our friends and family aren't buying from those bad places? And that's why we exist.
I see a lot. I feel like people just don't understand. The average person on the street knows, has heard about puppy mills, understands the concept of inhumane breeding, does not make that connection then to the pet store, to the online breeder that they're talking to, that they might be connected. So that education piece is something that we can definitely lean into. And I hope too down the road that we can talk about some of the other players in the process. So like you'd mentioned USDA, um, and when the USDA fails to hold some of these players accountable. Uh, and what's behind that? So short-staffed, underfunded. Yes, there will be bad actors in USDA. Certainly sounds like the person that was at Daniel Gingrich's place laughing about the Animal Rescue League not being there to intercept that dog that was being treated poorly. Obviously, in any organization, you're going to have, the whole range of personalities, but I can't believe that every USDA inspector feels that way, right? So, what are their limitations? What's their role in all of this? And just my thirst for knowledge.
This year was the first time I'd heard, I mean, not heard, but like really understood that the USDA every 4 years, which logically we know when I say it, you're going to get it. Every 4 years, there's a new administration. Every 4 years, they have a new boss. Every 4 years, they have new regulations, like new processes. I don't want to say regulations because the facilities haven't had to follow new regulations, but the inspectors themselves, it's like constant turmoil almost. So
Yeah.
I do think that while there might be some bad actors out there, because that's, the state of the world, right? There's always going to be a few bad apples when you're looking at a whole bushel. Um, but not everyone, but how frustrating would that be to know that every 4 years something is going to upend you? And right now, with everything being cut on the federal level, my concern is the animals. We have our own USDA testing facility. I'm not sure exactly what they do here in Ames. They have a lot of animals though. And when they had budget cuts, that affected Ames. Employees were laid off in Ames, and there were questions locally that we had to address with lawmakers and with people in Ames of who's taking care of those animals. Like the employees didn't want to have to leave. They were terminated by email, right? And then all of a sudden the animals are suffering. So over the next year and a half, I think that we're going to see weird things on inspection records, less inspections being performed, maybe, or more inspections being performed at problematic places, and then no attention being paid to the places that maybe aren't so problematic or maybe just aren't on anyone's radar yet.
And I think we could talk too on a future episode about what we have seen historically with some of the administration changes and the changes in the data that we use for our research and how we have seen changes in that as well. So we have no lack of things to talk about on this podcast.
Right. Well, the last thing I'll say, because I think we're actually coming up on an hour. We made it all the way to
Oh
an
my
hour today.
gracious. Somebody
Um,
shut us off.
Next week, you are going to be talking with Alexis and Jelaine because Alexis just came back from Missouri and she was with our volunteers down there doing Missouri's Humane Lobby Day. So you guys are the three of you are gonna talk a little bit about your experience being in the field, and I think that's gonna be a good conversation.
I'm excited for it. I'm excited to hear Alexis's side of being at the event, and then to talk to Jelaine a little bit about how we can help our teams facilitate those kinds of events. So that'll be a fun one.
Thank you all so much for tuning in this week. If you're not following us, we're on every form of social media, basically Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Substack. And you can sign up for our mailing list or make a donation. Whatever sparks joy this week, please just do one thing that educates somebody about puppy mills. Whether you're sharing Bailing Out Benji, you're wearing an activist shirt, whatever you're doing, help us educate about what puppy mills are and how people can't support them and shouldn't support them.
But we're going to put a link to Harry Ekman's LinkedIn post as well. If you want that story for yourself, we'll have a link to that in our show notes and a link to donate. And if you sign up as a recurring donor, we just might send you a t-shirt.
Always with the fundraising plugs. Yes.
I'm going to start recording my own commercials that we'll do like mid podcast.
So funny. Do you know Kristen of Bailing Out Benji? Well, she wants to talk to you today. Thank you all so much for sitting with us again this week. We will be back and we can't wait to continue having these conversations with you. Thanks, everyone.